Welcome back to Behind the Screams. I am your host, Jared Hill, and with me tonight, I have my new co host for our first show together. This is Tasha Reynolds.
What
Hello,
up?
Tasha.
What's going on, man?
I'm just excited to have you tonight and to hop into what I think is one of the most layered and textured and in-depth horror movies in a extremely long time.
It's so good. So
It's
good.
so good. It is so good. So, for those of you who don't know, you should know this fact about Tasha is that she loves body horror and her favorite movie is Human Centipede. Isn't that correct? Isn't that what you told me?
Yeah, that's absolutely not the case. So but also to be fair, I can read body horror. I just have a more difficult time watching it. Um that I kind of struggle with.
I think
But
Human Centipede should be our next thing we break down next week.
you would. You would.
Now,
Yeah.
I okay, like there's not very many textured layered themes of that, but I would do my best and I would come up with stuff just to do a show on it.
Just make stuff up just to be
Just
like,
just,
we have
just
to do this.
something and talk about how, the centipede talks about human connectedness and our, you know, desire to be together but not forced to be together. Like we have to pick and choose relationships, not be forced into one. Like I would come up with something just to do the show on it.
I veto.
Absolutely. So,
Already pulling the plug.
well, I know a lot of you out there watching, Tasha. She's edited your work, and she does a great job at that as well. But you also know her because of her cool puppies. How are the puppies doing?
They're good. They're sleeping their life away right now. Had dinner. They got a couple of new toys today, so they're thrilled with that.
Okay.
Yeah, just living the dream.
Yeah, I did a show one time with I think three of my four animals in the room, and
No.
it was one of those things where they all fell asleep, and
Oh, that's good though.
I was scared to wake them up and get them out of the room because I didn't know fights would start with the cats and dogs and everything. So I took a chance and I let them sleep, and they slept. They slept through. They did not fight. They did not do anything. They just laid in here and slept.
Wow. Well,
So
since we just had the time change and everything, it's definitely like past when they go to sleep at night. So they'll catch a second wind in a couple hours, probably, if they stick to
yeah.
their schedule.
Well, let's go ahead and jump into A24's Heretic. So, Tasha, you want to
I
give us a breakdown of the plot for this movie and who's in it?
Yes. So after this one, and somebody commented on my Facebook post about this movie and said the same thing. After this, like Hugh Grant is up there almost like Nick Cage level for horror for me. Like I never would have anticipated him being as good as he was in this movie. He
Absolutely.
nailed it. Um, so he's Mr. Reed. And then Sophie Thatcher is Sister Barnes, who you pointed out is also in Companion, which I
Yes.
have not seen yet. She was phenomenal. And then Chloe East is Sister Paxton. And one that I actually picked out on, but they must have give him, oh my god, I can't talk. Given him like a little extra prosthetics and kind of makeup. Topher Grace is the
Yeah.
elder that goes around, and I was like, that kind of looks like him, but also he's not that old, so they must have done something. But um, and that's pretty much. I mean, there's a couple other players here and there, but those are the primary ones that we deal with.
Yeah.
Um, like you said, it came out, or did you say it came out last year?
Mhm.
I had been dying to see this one and just finally saw it last week. So I was late to the party, but Um, Sisters Paxton and Barnes are Mormons, and they are the lucky ones that are going around making house calls. It sounded like it was people who had submitted requests for information
That's
specifically.
usually how it goes a lot of times. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I have never submitted a request for information, and
I'll
I
submit
still get.
one for you. I'll submit one for you.
You would too.
I definitely would,
You
especially
so
after this
would.
movie. I certainly would.
That'll be my first question to everybody. Have you seen the movie Heretic? Do you want to come in? Um, yeah, so they knock on his door. They're not supposed to, as young women, they're not supposed to go into a house with a man who's there by himself. He assures them that his wife is there. How, spoilers? I
Yeah,
mean,
we do spoilers. I do
I was
on
gonna
the
say there's no
show.
way around
Yeah,
it, really.
because we go so in depth. Spoilers
Yeah.
definitely. So feel free.
Um, yeah, so he's like, "Oh yeah, my wife is here." And he's like all cute about it. He's because they ask if he has a female roommate. And he's like, "Well, I have a soulmate. And I don't know if that counts." And it's just like, "Oh." But you can tell like something just feels off to them.
Yeah.
Um, but they go in anyways and sit down for this conversation and are not prepared for the directions that he takes the conversation in.
Mhm.
Um, he does a good job, even just watching it, of like taking it in so many different directions that it's kind of hard to get your bearings for where the conversation is going, which I'm sure is part of his whole process for doing
Mhm.
this. Um, but they finally decide that it is time to go and realize that they can't leave because his house is like a giant trap. And I don't know. He says he couldn't open it again till daylight. I think he probably could have, but it's a good excuse for him. So his whole thing is like he has done all of this research to try to discover what the one religion is of all religions. Um, because, everybody believes that their religion is that religion. So he
Mhm.
investigated everything. And he kind of puts these girls on the spot and is like, well, let's test your knowledge. And you can tell that they're not used to coming across somebody that's that direct
Mhm.
and asking questions that a lot of people may have, but they don't want to be rude because it's hard to ask those questions without sounding rude sometimes.
Mhm.
Um, I think I've told you before, I'm glad that we can have those conversations because anybody that doesn't know, I am not religious in the slightest. So it is nice to have somebody that I can go to and be like, this makes no sense to me. Explain it, please.
Yeah.
Um, so he puts their beliefs to the test and rigs this whole system that I think it's Sister Barnes says at one point that he's using them as test subjects, and that's
Mhm.
definitely what it feels like. Like, it makes you wonder how many people he's put through this process.
Yeah.
Um, so he claims that he can bring a woman back from the or that no, she's a prophet and comes back from the dead on her own. Um, and that was creepy. Just I've never thought a pie would be creepy, but like the sounds when she's eating it and
Yeah.
so she's eating this blueberry pie that he poisoned, and the girls are of course horrified because all of a sudden there's a dead person sitting there at the table, and she appears to come back to life, which Sister Paxton kind of breaks that down later. Um, but it's her like trying to get, well, both of them for the most part, trying to get out of the house.
Mhm.
Uh, and yeah, I'm not used to giving away the end of movies on a live stream. That feels weird.
You don't have to give away the end
I mean,
if
we'll
you don't
talk
want
about it
to.
anyways. But um, But yeah, it's, I mean, definitely strong psychological, religious, um, one of those movies that genuinely makes you wonder and leaves you asking questions later because it just, there's so many rabbit holes that you can go down if you start, fact checking him and trying to fact check them, and it's just
Yeah.
insanity. And he's
And
just so good at being that creepy old guy.
oh, he is. He does so great. And I like how they leave a lot of the ambiguity of the movie. Like they don't answer any questions
Yeah, because it
at
almost
all.
feels. Today was my third watch. I almost kind of feel like she died.
Yeah.
That felt like it could be a very distinct possibility.
Hmm.
Uh,
Now you mentioned wondering if he did that to anybody else. Like that was the thought I had is was the prophet, was it somebody he had invited in at one point and kept there and did this through and just broke them down
yeah.
psychologically.
Well, and
Uh,
all the other women that he had in those cages too.
yeah.
So it's like, at what point do you get put on like the red flag list for religious institutions when
Yeah,
everybody you send there disappears?
they don't
Like,
come
they
they don't
should
come back.
send something up at some point, like flare, smoke signal, whatever. Like, mm, leave that house alone.
Absolutely. Don't send any more. But all of that stuff that you brought up, when you go through the movie, you see all of these different certain themes start to come out. And I went through and I picked about, I don't remember, it was about 6 themes that I thought really stood out in this movie. And the first one I had written down was basically faith versus doubt in the fragility of belief and belief systems at times in general. This film, it repeatedly places the 2 missionary girls in situations where he is like pressing their faith and testing their faith. And
Yeah.
so it's not just physical danger with this one. There is philosophical, existential dread for these 2 missionaries as their faith is getting tested. And he goes into that argument of iterations, which I'll bring up later. And fragility of belief too. I thought it was interesting how, I don't remember if it was Barnes or Paxton brought up the case where she was like, I know that there's been studies on prayer that show that they don't really change anything, but I'm going to pray anyway. Do you remember that part?
Paxton.
That
Yeah, it was
Paxton. Okay.
Paxton towards the end.
So you've got that theme. You also have the theme. Another huge theme that comes out in this is the control, the power, the manipulation of not only religious structures, but you see Reed is the same way.
Yeah.
He's doing the exact same thing that he accuses religions of doing. And that's one thing I'll point out later is the hypocrisy of Reed
Yeah.
uh, in this. But you see that it's not just about these 2 Mormon girls being indoctrinated and control and power that the Mormon church has over them, but you also see Reed trying to do this same exact thing. So that's
Yeah.
a huge theme that comes out. And then you have the idea of the one true religion that you brought up. That's a huge theme that comes out. Like, what is the one true religion? Reed lectures them, and he uses the Monopoly game to talk about iterations. And for those of you listening that don't know what iterations are, he uses it to say that um, everything can be traced back to an original. And he tries to say that all of the themes in religion are all borrowed from one another. And he starts mentioning all these things, and I'll get into that once we finish going through the themes. But he uses the Monopoly game, and he compares the different versions and evolution of the Monopoly game to religions. And so when we're talking about adorations, that's what we're we're hitting at. So he presses them on that, and he uses all of this high sounding rhetoric, right, to really kind of freeze the girls, and that's what's um, really. And I think with this, I guess we could use this, go back into the power and control of manipulation. But I think with that, this movie shows how susceptible people are to rhetoric.
Yeah.
If you can sound like you know what you're talking about, if you can make a good point, it doesn't matter if you're factual or not.
Yeah.
Um,
That was one that I've made notes on too. Um, because I think he even says at one point, like, because of the candle, when he says his wife is baking at the beginning and everything, he's like, this entire thing is set up to see how long you go once you feel uncomfortable, knowing this isn't a situation you should be in, how long you continue to just go along with it.
right.
Um, and it does. Like, he could have been spouting off anything, but he sounds like he knows exactly what he's talking about. And a lot of people, especially, I feel like from my side of things, like as far as religion goes, a lot of times you're not taught to question those things. Like, what this person says is what goes, and they're not going to lead you astray, and you're not supposed to question the authority figure.
Mhm.
And that kind of led into another one that I felt like was in there, was like, you don't, it's like an American history book. They don't teach you the bad things that America did along the way. It's, oh, hey, this is sunshine and rainbows. And you find out as an adult, like, the concentration camps that we set up for Japanese in World War II. They don't put that in our history books. Um, so it it feels like they're kind of commenting on, a lot of generic churches. Um, and obviously this doesn't apply to you, but like just the stereotype of a
Mhm.
church.
Mhm.
Um, they don't, none of the ones that I ever went to really touched on, you know, the history of it. It's like the sunshine and rainbows. So they send these girls door to door where, they can run into this guy and get bombarded with all these questions and just be so unprepared for anything that he has to say. There's never any kind of debate as to, why things are done the way they are, or this
Mhm.
is why we believe this despite this. um, it's just like regurgitating what they've been told,
Yeah.
uh, which, you know, set them up in a horrible situation. But
Well,
anyhow,
and that's what happens when you're not taught to question anything, and you have dogmas, and there you teach, this is what you say, this is it. If they say this, bring it back around to this. Like
yeah.
it can be scripted. And so what happens is people just learn the dogma. They don't really look into things for themselves. And so when you take them off script, they're like,
Uh,
and you
deer in
saw
the
that,
headlights.
yeah, and you saw that with them,
Yeah.
with Paxton and Barnes. That's what his goal was,
Hmm.
and he absolutely accomplished that. You had mentioned the house and
Hmm.
how the house was set up, and looking at that, I thought, like, this house, like, this is like a metaphor for religious experience, existential dread in general, because the that
Interesting.
room is like a labyrinth, and you have this entrapment, and I think it reflects the internal struggle, the fear, the doubt, the fear of asking, is my belief wrong, or what if what I believe is wrong, what if what I have been taught is wrong. And I think that's, whether you're religious or not religious, when it comes to anything that you've been taught and you've anchored yourself in, like it does create an existential crisis. Like, what if I'm wrong?
Yeah.
Um, and so you have that they're running around, they're in this labyrinth in their sphere, and I was like, man, this is exactly what it's like to be caught in that existential dread is as
Mm.
well. So I saw that as a picture and a metaphor of what was going on with them internally as well.
Yeah. And it probably, well, I mean, obviously everything in the movie is related somehow. But like at the beginning, he asked them, if they were born and raised or where they were from. And Paxton was like born and raised. This has always been her religion. This is what she knows. And then Barnes had come in later in life.
Hmm.
And I feel like, I mean, obviously because of how he switches the key for the bike lock, which I'll eventually get into. He knew or had the feeling to take that out of Barnes' jacket and put it into Paxton's. So he had, at that point, I feel like he had to have gotten more of a vibe that she was going to be the one to outlast Barnes, which I did not expect. I was
I don't
not
know.
prepared for that. I thought Barnes was going to be our final girl,
Hmm. Hmm.
um, and she was not. I mean, she was close, but no.
I didn't make it. Going along with that is the ambiguity, right? The ending. Did she die? Did she escape?
Yeah.
The butterfly. Like again, that theme of ambiguity is always through it. Now, did you notice in the film there was one part? She uh, Paxton talks about the butterflies being special to her. There's one
Mm.
part in the film where they are back in the little chapel. I think it was, yeah, it's in the chapel, and the song in the background, you can hear the lady, she's singing about butterflies.
Oh, I never caught
Notice
that.
that?
Uh-uh.
And I caught that on my third viewing because I didn't catch it the first two times.
Yeah.
So on my last viewing, my third viewing of it the other day, and it made me think like, okay, is this something that the director put in there as like foreshadowing, or
Yeah. Which
did
would be easy to believe with how everything is set up here.
did Reed somehow set that up? Like,
Yeah.
was that on purpose?
I don't know. Well, because it seems like he's really got this down to a science.
Hmm.
Um, which is like, okay, did the girls just fit what he needed to give his narrative that well? Or, has he done this so many times that he's got like six or seven different gigs that he does, and he's like, okay, well, let's see, they fit into this one, so we'll take this approach.
Yeah,
Like, does he use Connect Four for other people? Like, and again, back to how many times has he done this?
yeah,
So,
yeah.
um, I forgot where I was going with that. Normal.
Well, if it comes back up, you can always just pop in, and if you
Oh,
remember it.
I can talk.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh, oh,
yeah.
oh. At the very beginning, where's my one of the things that I picked up on, and it can also be connected to religion, but when the girls are standing at the door, you can tell that Barnes is very uncomfortable and picking up on some bad vibes. Um, Paxton, you can tell that she feels a little off, but she's just like the eternal optimistic,
Yeah.
we're here to do the good work. And I feel like as especially as women, like we are so programmed from the very beginning, like it's important to be polite. Like
Mm,
you don't want to offend somebody. If somebody makes you uncomfortable, you assume the best. They don't intend to, so you don't want to be like, you know what, we have to go. You make up an excuse like, oh, hey, we just got a phone call, even though he's rigged his house to where you can't get cell phone service because they want to be like, oh yeah, sorry, we have to go. And that puts people in terrible situations also, like in horror movies and, excuse me, life in general. Um, there's a true crime podcast that I listen to, and their whole one of their mottos is politeness.
Yeah.
Um, because you stop to talk to somebody who's chasing you down the street, or like somebody who's trying to get help, and next thing you know they're carjacking you and stuff like that. Like, your safety comes before being polite, and they do not have, I feel like, especially where you go door to door, you're not really given kind of the tools to be safe, because look at how easy it was for him to be like, oh yeah, I have a wife, you can come
Yeah.
on in.
And I
And
believe it.
and that was all it took. um but from the religious side of things, like, you're also, as opposed to definitive proof, obviously it's more about the faith that you have and what you believe in. And in some ways, I feel like being taught that was a grave disservice to them, because had they wanted proof and been like, hey, we need her to come to the door before we come in,
Hmm.
we can't just take your word for it, we can't just trust you, um, then this would have turned out very differently.
Yep. And it goes back to that point of you look at Reed, he was his rhetoric and his demeanor and everything was just so deceptive, and it pulled them in. And
Yeah.
that compacted with their not wanting to offend, and their politeness, and then their gullibility. It was just like that scene that you're talking about. It's like you can see it, like that's the perfect storm brewing.
Oh yeah.
Like, after you've seen the film and you know how Reed is, and you go back and you watch that scene, you're like,
Oh
oh my
yeah. Red
gosh.
flags everywhere.
Absolutely, it's there, and you're like, man, this is he's baiting these girls, and
Yeah,
he knows
he
he knows he's got them.
I cannot get over how well he did in that role. I just I has he done any other horror movies before?
Not that I'm aware of, because I remember being shocked when this first started making its rounds and the previews were coming out, and they're
Yeah.
like, Hugh Grant, and I was like, what what is he doing in a horror movie? I'm like, this is gonna suck.
Yeah, because I feel like he's always like that goofy, comedic, romantic
Yeah,
kind of thing. So, on one hand, like, it's normal to see him being awkward, and I feel like he's pretty good at being awkward at this point. Um, but and I know, obviously it's built into the script. Like, that's part of his test for them is, at what point do you draw your lines
yeah,
and set your boundaries? Um, but it's one of those conversations that, like, genuinely made me uncomfortable just sitting there listening to the dialogue. Um, but I, like, horse laughed when he made the comment about, with great power comes great responsibility. And Paxton was like, Spider-Man. And he was like, Voltaire. And just like he was so disgusted that she used Spider-Man as her example for that. Um,
yeah.
and that,
But that reflects their ignorance too,
yeah.
and he, like, when he hears that, he's like, I know I've got him.
Yeah. I'm dealing with this level of person.
Yeah,
Which, I mean, ultimately ends up not being fair because she pulls it off. Well, we think that she did. I mean, at least he ended up dead too, if
yeah,
if she didn't make it. Um,
yeah. Bad
but
guy dies, so it
right,
all comes out
I
in the wash.
I really liked how they built Paxton into definitely being, um, like I said, the eternal optimist, and just like, she comes off as somebody who never questions things, and she talks about how the importance of it is how it makes you feel and things along those lines.
Hmm.
But then, Barnes points out that he just wants somebody to debate him. Like he's kind of like a Bond villain giving these big monologues. And you can tell that people don't often challenge what he has to say. So by the time she starts kind of giving it back to him, you can tell she piques his interest and he's way more intrigued in what's happening than just
Yeah.
regurgitating his own information. Um, so she did a good job as the underdog.
Yeah.
I was
Which
super proud of her.
that's a great segue into one of the things I really wanted to hone in on this film is so his idea of iterations,
Yeah.
right? Where he goes through, especially of that scene where he talks about how specifically Jesus is basically just a combination of regurgitated myths. And he goes back and saying how, these people had a virgin birth. This guy had 12 disciples, and he gets into Mithras and Horus and everything. And
Mm.
I'm watching that, and it's like he's so confident, and his rhetoric is so great and everything, but he's wrong. Like
Yeah.
his facts are just so bogus. And that's kind of what I wanted to point out, because I wonder how many people watch this movie and they themselves hear it in the confidence that he says it, and they're like, oh yeah, well, he's right. And then the Mormon missionaries never challenge him. So I wanted to circle back around to that and look at some of the things he points out. Like
Mm.
he talks about the virgin birth, and like you have some claims like Horus and Mithras are claimed to somehow have been born of a virgin, but Horus, which is Egyptian, he was born of Isis and Osiris, after Isis reassembled Osiris's dismembered body. So it's not a virgin
Yeah.
birth. It is a supernatural birth, but not a virgin birth. And then
Huh.
you've got the story of Perseus, which is also sometimes has been wrongly construed to have a virgin birth, where if you look at Perseus and you go back and read all of that, he was born when Zeus impregnates, oh God, what was her name?
There's a lot of
Uh,
hers that
Danae, or something like that.
I
And
can't remember.
it's like and there's something with like a shower of gold, and it's a supernatural conception
Yeah.
basically, but it's not a virgin birth. And then Mithras, which is what he points out, was was actually born from a rock, not
I
from a
mean,
woman.
if there's a virgin, I'd say it's safe that a rock is in that category.
So that's like way off. And then you have like the idea of miracle working saviors, and you do have people, Dionysus turning water into wine, which is kind of a loose parallel to Jesus and stuff like that. But never do you see this idea of a miracle worker connected to a suffering servant, Messiah like figure. Then he makes this claim of, resurrections. Like all of these myths have a savior dying and rising again. I mentioned Osiris. Osiris was dismembered and reassembled by Isis, but he became king of the dead, not resurrected from his mortal life, like no bodily resurrection.
Yeah.
Um, Tammuz, which is connected with Baal worship. Tammuz, Baal, a bunch of those gods and goddesses were vegetation gods who's had the cycle of death and return that symbolized the seasons. So there was no bodily resurrection with that. And then actually in Greek thought, they were not big on bodily resurrection at all. They thought the concept was foolish. And then basically you have the idea, he talks about Krishna. Pretty much everything he says about Krishna is wrong.
Yeah.
Um, everything. It's kind of the same thing. Like there was no 12 disciples, there was no birth, there's not a resurrection. Now his spirit ascends. I don't remember which Veda it is that talks about it. Now his spirit does ascend to unite with Vishnu and stuff like that, but again, no bodily resurrection or anything like that. But this Jesus copycat theory was made big by several authors who just kind of went through and picked and distorted things, and it was really popularized by Zeitgeist.
Yeah.
That was one of the big things that popularized it. So I just wanted to point out that everything, like nothing that came out of his mouth in that was true, but he sounds so convincing.
Yeah.
So the rhetoric can go both ways. You can have, these Mormons or any religious for that matter, they can use this rhetoric and sound so convincing and indoctrinate you. But it can also be on the other side of the spectrum. Like,
Yeah.
facts can get twisted. So whether we're religious or non-religious, we have to be on guard against rhetoric, because
Especially these days.
that's how we do politics. Um, I got a little political last time on weapons, so
Yeah.
um, but
Well,
yeah, rhetoric. You can't be swayed by rhetoric. That's why it's so important to fact check and know things and know facts and stuff like that. But again, it just shows that, and basically, um, I think Reed is a hypocrite and a fraud, because he's doing the very exact same thing that he accuses these Mormon missionaries of doing. Now, you brought up the point was, did he really believe those things, or was he just BSing to try to get them to debate?
yeah. Because it felt to me like he specifically engineered it that way to show them how that control happens. Because most people who are part of a religion aren't like, I'm brainwashed, it's fine. And there are plenty of people who are religious who are not brainwashed, obviously. But, from his side of things, like, nobody really questions anything.
Yeah.
Um, and kind of excellent segue on your part. Um, there's an actual quote from him that I wrote down, as far as like fact checking and trusting things, because he makes the comment, because they're Mormons, and there's been a lot of flip flopping as to what's allowed and what's not, and polygamy and all that good stuff.
Mhm.
Um, so he, and I think it might have been you that made the comparison to like a game of telephone, where these texts originally come from wherever they come from, um, but once they're here, it's men who are responsible for translating and transcribing. And we have the Bible, but there's 8 million different versions of the Bible. And it's like, well, if these are the words that like came down, then how do you trust what you're hearing at this point? Because the
Mhm.
what he says is, if revelation by God is filtered through man, and man is flawed, and man sins, and man lies, then how do we know any of it is true? Which has always been something for me personally, where I'm like, if this exactly is what was said, then how come we have so many different versions of it?
Mhm.
And I he they at that point, Paxton and Barnes, they definitely didn't know what to say, because it was specifically in relation to polygamy, and you could tell they had kind of the answer that the church feeds them as to how
Mhm.
to respond to those questions. But then he's, pointing out Joseph Smith's adultery. Like, Joseph Smith was not the best guy. No offense
Yeah.
to the Mormons. They did also, though, I really appreciated them bringing up South Park's Book of Mormon. Um, I
Yeah.
that was a reference I appreciated. Um, so, it circles back to like them not being given, they're not going to teach you that the leader did these things and was also responsible for these horrible things.
Mhm.
It's this is the good that came out of this situation. This is what we got, and this is all you need to know. These are not the droids you're looking for.
Yeah.
Uh, so
Yeah. No, the question he brings up about revelation being filtered through man, like that gets into the theological topic of the doctrine of inspiration. When you look at it from Christian theology, inspiration by the Holy Spirit. How do we know these texts are from God?
Mhm.
And the way that, because I mean, it is a valid point what he says. I will give him that. And the way that I would probably answer him would be from what we understand um, with Christ and what he taught, and what was written down. And the thing with oral tradition is, and we have to understand it. It's not like a game of telephone, and we are so far removed from oral tradition and how that functioned in a society because we're so word, print based.
Mhm.
And so these oral traditions were pretty much set in stone, and if somebody were to go off of them, they would know. And so as these oral traditions began to be written down, and the apostles begin to write down their depictions of Jesus as they started to die off. They needed something authoritative because the apostles were the authoritative messengers. So they needed something written down by them or that was somehow connected with them, because not every New Testament letter was written by an apostle, but it had to be connected with them. But based on their understanding, Jesus Christ was the only infallible word. He was the very word of God, the fullness of God's revelation. So basically what you have in the Old Testament is kind of a lot of groping in the dark. They
Did
get
you
it
hear
wrong
that?
sometimes. What happened is this
He
roaring.
grumbled at you.
Oh, so you've got a
Threatened
lot
you.
of evolving, and you see the Bible correcting itself. Well, Jesus is like the ultimate correction to where they got God wrong at times, still interpreting him as like this vengeful cultic deity that tells them to wipe out all of these people. It's the very point and reason why Jesus had to come, because they weren't grasping the full revelation. And so once they encountered that full revelation, they tried to write it down and describe him as best as possible. And the thing with the doctrine of inspiration is that God chose to use fallible human beings to write down his word and work through it. So you're going to have historical errors, like nothing major, but that's why you see, gospel accounts don't agree historically about where things happened and where certain places were in the, when did this happen in Jesus's ministry, and they all have different motives for writing it. But God chose to use fallible human beings to talk about something that was infallible, if that makes sense. And so the trust for me comes in that, do I believe that I can basically trust their depiction and the gospels being written like ancient biographies and what they said, and especially knowing when you dismiss that whole Jesus the copycat theory and it wasn't borrowing from anything. Like, I think everything's a step of faith, but I think there's enough credulity and credence there to make that step for me. And so I'm okay with the doctrine of inspiration, and a lot of scholars are, that inspiration doesn't equate with inerrancy. Like the Bible has errors, it has textual errors, it has historical errors, because human beings, God didn't raise them up out of that. I would be more skeptical of the Bible if it was perfect, honestly. If everything lined up, everything perfect, I was like, oh yeah, they worked on this. They made this stuff up. They made it all fit together too perfectly.
Uh-huh.
I would be more skeptical of it. But my personal belief is, and I know we get people from all kinds of walks, and I have people who rage listen to me as well, and this will probably set them off. But I think that this doctrine of strict inerrancy is responsible for a lot of the atheism we see, because you are taught that the Bible does not err in anything, nothing historical, everything is 100% factual, and that inspiration equals 100% right facts all the time. And then when you encounter things that aren't factual, or stories that were not meant to be factual, or they got historical places wrong, then what does that do? If you equate inerrancy with inspiration, the whole thing collapses, the
Hmm.
whole thing falls. So I'm not saying anything that is not talked about and agreed upon in scholarly circles. This stuff just doesn't get down into the mainstream. So,
Hmm.
but anyway,
And
that's my little tangent.
that's kind of the point.
Yeah.
Um, I think, well, there were, well, two things, I guess. One is like on the subject of his inaccuracies. Now you've got me thinking like it's curious that they used so many inaccuracies when there are so many things out there, like as far as like pagan religions, celebrations that have been adopted along the way. Like, don't they say that like they found out Jesus was born in like April or something now? It was unlikely it was in
Yeah, it was
December.
never December 25th. And like when he brings up the whole December 25th thing, I'm like, Jesus wasn't even born at Christmas. Like,
Right? And that's what makes me wonder if they, again, if Reed's speeches were intentionally inaccurate, because there is information out there that's accurate that they could have pulled from that could have gone to proving his points. Um, when you look at the history of Christianity, especially moving through Western Europe with, the Celts and all the different pagan religions that were through there, the Druids and everything else, like there's the talk of them like coming in and they take over these sacred spots, and that's where they build churches to, you know, repurpose those spots and
yeah,
bring in the better spirits, I guess, from their perspective. But there are things kind of along the way that get adopted. So I do wonder. You've really got me thinking about. I think he had to have done that on purpose.
it's either like, okay, it depends on which theme you want to go with is the
Yeah.
strongest. Like, okay, is the director trying to get at this theme of like, is he trying to just I can't even talk either. Is he
It's
trying
good.
to
I don't feel so bad.
compare? Is he make a comparison that Reed is just as ignorant and hypocritical as the thing he's trying to tear down? Or is it that like you said, he craves the debate?
Yeah.
Like, is he doing this on purpose? Like, I don't know.
Yeah. Because, I mean, with the confidence that he speaks of all these things, like, he had to have done some level of research to even know who these other references are. So it almost feels like it has to be on purpose at that point. Um, to throw yourself so deeply and immerse yourself so much into religion and fast food, as he said.
Yeah,
Um, you can't I mean, can you walk away from that kind of research being that horribly inaccurate?
you can't. Like, there's no way. Like, if you really research and compare and basically just a cursory reading what I pointed out and look at all of
Yeah,
these different stories, like they're not the same at all.
yeah,
Uh, so I don't think you can do the type of study he claimed he
he had
did
done.
and then, but he's so adamant about that. At first, he hints at it about, you know, doesn't he hint at it in when they're in the living room, something about searching for the one true religion? Does he mention that they had things in common in when they're in the living room?
I don't remember if he does it there or if the majority of that comes later.
I know the majority of it comes later, but I thought maybe he had mentioned something subtle
It
about
could
it.
be. I mean, there's so much to
There
unpack
is,
in that
there is.
conversation. I I remember at one point I paused it the first time I watched it and realized it was already halfway through the movie and nothing had really happened at that point, but you already feel like it's been this roller coaster because the dialogue is just so good and you're just like so focused on what's happening. Um, you're like, "Oh god, like what are they gonna do for the second half of this movie if it's like this far in and there's been no movement with it yet?"
Yeah.
Um, and I think I don't remember if he mentioned it at some point or if it was just one of the things that I've always taken issue with that this movie reminded me of. Does he bring up at any point like how there are some claims that like God is supposed to be this all-powerful, benevolent, amazing being, but then things like what happens to them happens and there's no real feeling of divine intervention. He brings that up at some point, doesn't he? Like, why would
I
he let you suffer through this?
I want to say he made like a subtle hint at God and the problem of evil. I want to say that's thrown in there somewhere. Like he kind of
It's so
slipped it
hard
in.
because he crammed so much into this movie. Like, I would love to talk to the writer someday and just be like,
Yeah,
I need to pick your brain, bro.
we need more. We need more from
uh,
him. We need more Hugh Grant too in horror.
Yeah. Oh my god, yeah. I hope that he pulls like again to make the Nick Cage comparison. I hope that he just spends the rest of his career doing crazy off the wall shit that he's never done before
Yeah,
just so we can get like the full range of what he can do. Cuz
absolutely.
he was just amazing. It was so good.
Seeing him in one of the a similar manipulative, psychologically manipulative role
Yeah.
like that,
Cuz
because
I mean
he,
that's
oh my gosh, he nailed it.
he nailed it. One comment somebody had made because I had posted that I had just watched it, and there were a bunch of people that popped up. Um, when I had seen, I usually try to avoid trailers, because you know these days I always make Barbarian the standard of movies that make a trailer where you don't know what the hell's happening in the movie, but you know trailers give away so much. But I had seen the trailer for this one when I went to see it. I don't I couldn't tell you now what movie it was that I went to see in theaters, but and I got the impression that the house was going to be a lot more of a labyrinth kind of than it was. Like they
Yeah,
were going to have these series of tasks that they had to get through to be able to get to the exit, and I was kind of disappointed that they didn't do that. Like there's, you know, there's obviously still a lot of twists and turns for them to work their way through and for Paxton to hack her way through as she's, you know, coming to the realization of what's going on. Um but I really would have liked to have seen especially the model that he has built of the house. It makes it look like it's a way more elaborate setup than it actually is.
yeah,
So I would have liked to have seen them do that. Uh,
yeah, yeah,
but then like would it have detracted from all of the dialogue, like the points that he's trying to make? Um, damn it. Now I don't know.
yeah. Because this one is, it's creating psychological fear through existential dread, I think.
Yeah. Which I mean it. it nailed. It did a good job with that. Um, and it was funny, like there were a couple times, the movie starts out and I'm like, Team Reed, and I'm like, you go, dude, raising all these points and asking all these questions and everything else. And I'm like, can't remember the last time I cheered for who is obviously a villain like this. But then at some point, like I actually even felt bad for, I was like, man, it's not even like my beliefs being put on the spot here, but I feel bad for them because they're not bad people. Um, which I mean, maybe that's another underlying theme. Like it's not people who, I don't know, that's, I feel like that's a dangerous route to go down with the way things are the way they are right now. Like having certain beliefs or having been raised a certain way, like not making somebody a bad person.
Hmm.
It's just them like kind of like being raised in a cult, I guess. Paxton had been born and raised into it, and she was clearly like at the end of it, she was a very strong person who was able to pull through. Um, but then it's like, well, your beliefs also got you in that position to begin with. So it's kind of a catch
Yeah,
22 there, I guess.
there's so much ambiguity and tension, and like everything circles back to something else in this movie.
Yeah.
It does.
They they did a great job of like, I mean, despite the ambiguity and some of the vagueness, like they really tied up ends that needed to be tied up
Hmm.
as opposed to, because with this movie it would have been very easy for them to just throw a bunch of stuff at the wall and just not care what stuck and just rolled with it.
Yeah,
Um, but the fact that everything is so connected, relevant, that's the word I was trying to think of. Um, that, the way he derails these conversations with talks about like fast food and, Monopoly and Radiohead. Also, I never want to hear him sing Creep ever again because that was the creepiest rendition of Creep I've ever heard in my life. Like he has almost ruined that song for me with his little bit there that he recites
you
because
need to see if they have it as a ringtone to put on your phone.
oh god, no. Because he is a creep and he is a weirdo. Um, and also, did you by any chance fact check that part? Like with the copyright infringement?
No, I didn't.
I wonder if that's accurate too.
I did not
Um,
expect that. I
I'll have to
just
look
focused
that
more
up.
on the religious part.
I was trying to that was what I was mostly focusing on when I heard the music, was like trying to pick up on elements of creep. I was like,
I didn't notice it at
you don't
first.
hear it.
I didn't notice it at first.
Yeah, I still struggled with that part, but yeah, he has almost ruined that song for me because that's what I'm gonna hear in my head now every time I hear that song. But yeah, he
Yeah,
does a really good job, speaking of derailing, um, of just, catching them so off guard with just the variety, and it feels like a bunch of random nonsense until you see where he's going with it. Um, and it would have been so easy for a conversation like that to just get lost among all the trees in the
yeah,
forest. So I definitely kudos to the writers for this because they did a really good job of that.
absolutely. And like we didn't even have time to get into the whole near death experience part at the end with the prophet.
Oh
Like
yeah.
that's a whole other thing to unpack. Like um, we may have to do a follow up one day on Heretic again.
Right.
Because
Do an
there's
extra.
still so much. There's still so much, and like I didn't even really get to go in depth on answering your question about copies of the Bible and text criticism and how all that works out, because that's a pretty in-depth conversation too. So
Yeah.
the the thing is this movie brings up so many topics that are so intricate and in depth. It's like every time you touch on one topic, it has to be like unpacked, and there's layers and layers that you can't possibly get to everything in this movie.
Yeah, and then it
And
brings up 6
no,
other points that you're like, "Oh god, and this, and this, and this," and
yes.
it just runs away.
So we may have to do a circle back around to Heretic at some point again.
Yeah. Someday
And
when we're big and famous and we have, like, a Patreon and, all those things, we'll do a special follow-up episode.
on this. But yeah, so those of you out there, if you have not seen this film, it is streaming on HBO Max right now. Definitely watch it, but you have to pay attention. You can't halfway watch this movie.
No, no, you can't.
You cannot be
It's
doing something
way
else and then
too
watch this movie,
mm-mm.
or
And
you
it's
will
not
be
very
lost.
often that I take the time to sit and just watch a movie, but I've done it with this one 3 times now in the last week, so and I still pick up something new every time. It's so good.
Yeah, it is. Yes, it is. So, um, we will be back next week doing Human Centipede.
You
No,
can do Human Centipede.
we will. Tasha and I will come up with what we what we want to do next week and what we will unpack, and we'll get all that worked out. But be sure to come back next Tuesday night at 8:30 Central, 9:30 Eastern for Behind the Screams, and we hope to be able to take another film and unpack it and take you through it, through all of the ins and outs of everything. And this is why I love horror so much,
Oh,
is
yeah.
why I started doing this show. Is there's so many deep horror movies out there that people just sometimes think of horror as just all blood and guts, and while that is a staple of it, the
Yeah.
stories are so much more,
It's
so
so
much more,
in-depth.
so good.
It's
So
amazing.
thank you, Tasha. You did a great job. Appreciate you being my new co-host.
Somebody had to do it. It's a tough job,
Yeah,
but I'll take
you
one for the team.
stepped up and do it. So as we go along with the show, we're going to definitely amp things up and get some intro videos made, and stuff of that nature. So it is slow and steady, but we will get there. So thank you, Tasha. Thank you for all of your insight and helping me break this film down.
You got it,
And
bro.
we will see y'all all next Tuesday night. Thank you.
Bye.